3 o'clock, and I'm calling the meeting to order. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Commissioner Purvis? Here. Cowan? Commissioner Brittenfield? Here. Chair Ray?
Here.
Vice Chair Span? Here. Commissioner Corral?
Here.
Commissioner Hanlon?
Here. Can I have a motion to accept the minutes as submitted, or unless there's further discussion?
I'll move. Commissioner Hanlon moves.
Commissioner Purvis seconds.
All those in favor? Oh, that's right. Oh.
We're doing hand votes today, so if you can all go for it. Who in favor?
Unanimous. Okay. So we don't seem to have anything under written communication. Is there anyone in the audience who wanted to speak about anything that is not on the agenda? No? Okay, then with no public hearings, we'll move on to current business. The first item being design review for a residence at 243 East 10th Avenue.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Jasmine Fernandez, she's assistant planner, and I will be presenting item 1 on historic preservation.
Yeah, we're not hearing.
Oh, sorry.
Lights on.
Yeah, what? Okay.
That's not hold on. Try again.
Can you hear me? No? Oh. Let's try this. How's that? Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Jasmine Fernandez, assistant planner, and I will be presenting item 1 on the historic preservation agenda. Case number ADM 19-0322. So this is a 7,000 square foot vacant lot located on the south side of East 10th Avenue between South Broadway and South Juniper Street. Address is 243 East 10th Avenue. The zoning of the property is R16, which is a single-family residential zone, 6,000 square feet minimum lot sizes, and located within the old Escondido neighborhood historic district. Some of you may remember a residential project that was proposed for the same site 3 years ago, where HPC had approved a proposed major renovation to an existing dwelling in May of 2017 under case number ADM 17-0071. That project was never built. In 2018, it was determined by our building official that new building plans were required to be submitted because the project was not considered a remodel due to the fact that there was only one wall of that existing house that was left standing, barely standing, and the rest of the structure, including the foundation, had been completely removed. And so the vacant lot was sold last year in July of 2019, and the new owners have submitted new plans for the construction of a new 2,132 square feet, one-story, single-family residence, along with a 480 square feet detached garage with a 480 square feet accessory dwelling unit above it, located at the rear of the property, that would take access from the yard. The main dwelling will have 3 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. The detached garage is a dwelling unit of it. It is a one-bedroom and one-bath unit. The stair access to the accessory dwelling unit is on the east side of that building. The architectural design of the structures will be in a Spanish style with a cream or white color, stucco walls, and terracotta colored tile roofs. The front side of the main house will have an arched front entry door and arched fixed windows. All windows are wood clad except for the balcony windows, which are vinyl windows. The trim color on the doors and the windows is sage green, and the wood roof beams or rafters. The patio cover and the stairs will be stained a dark brown color. There's an existing 6-foot-high wood fence along the west and the south property lines, and there will be a new 6-foot-high wood fence proposed along the east boundary line. Grading plans have also been submitted for the project to our engineering department, and landscaping would be required as part of that grading plan review and approval process. There is a mix of single-story and two-story homes along this portion of East 10th Avenue. The majority of the homes were built in the 1940s and 50s in the California bungalow styles. The homes adjacent to the property are all single-story. The two-story homes are located on the west portion of the street. Here are some photos of the homes adjacent to the lot. And note that the home adjacent to the lot on the left side has an arch design on the front porch. On the west end of the street, there is a Mediterranean Revival stucco home that was built in 1925, and that is listed on the city's historic local register. This house has red tile on the shed-style roof that's covering the arched front porch. And this is the only house on this portion of the street that has a tile roof. And across the street from that Mediterranean Revival stucco house, there is a two-story stucco home that was built in 2001. And as you can see on this map, within the city block between East 9th Avenue and 11th Avenue and South Broadway and South Juniper, there are not too many homes on this portion of 10th Avenue that are identified on the city's historical resources inventory list. Per Article 40 of the Escondido zoning code, design review is required to be conducted by the Historic Preservation Commission for all new construction projects located within the old Escondido Historic District. And prior to establishing the certificate of appropriateness, staff is requesting determination on whether the proposed project is consistent with the design guidelines for historic resources, and whether the design of the new home is appropriate and compatible with the existing architectural characteristics of the surrounding homes within this historic district neighborhood. I'm available for any questions, and the applicant is also here to answer any questions.
Do the commissioners have any questions, concerns?
Commissioner Purvis, could you please go back, I think, 2 slides where it shows the elevation of the, and then some of the, I think, the materials? Yes, thank you. Commissioner Purvis, I have a question regarding the stucco. It says a stucco La Habra X50 crystal white. So I assume crystal white. I don't know who to address. Should I address the architect? Quick question. I'm not sure if the stucco.
The stucco?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Could you just address the texture of the stucco?
The texture is a smooth texture, but it's not Santa Barbara smooth, so there's just a light texture to it.
Sand texture?
It'd be closer to a sand texture.
All right, thank you.
You know why you're not here?
too. The photo on the bottom for reference only.
What it was referenced for was to actually have a photo showing arches on both sides to mimic the front of the house, so you can see that. And you can see the gable end on the one side, so you can just kind of picture that the second gable is going to look like that. And then you're going to have tails, which are very hard to see from the elevations. And so you're going to have the brown, dark brown, which goes with the typical Spanish-looking house.
And I imagine you'd have some tile scuppers there.
Some tile wet?
Scuppers over the peak there, drain, it looks like a vent or drain.
Oh, yes.
The point to my question is, too often we hear from developers that it's going to look something like this. We have the option to change it. I really like the way that looks, and I think it would be outstanding in the neighborhood. I just don't want to find out that by the time it's occupied, it's tweaked so much that it doesn't look like that.
I don't think there's really anything changing to this design. The owners are here, and we spent a lot of time before we went to the design to try to be as authentic as we could do it. And that's what they're looking for.
Thank you.
Other commissioners?
One question about the garage.
Yes.
Is there any way that you can move the entry door to the unit to another elevation? I don't know if it's just
To move it to the side instead of to the alley?
Yes, something different where then you, I don't know if it's just it looks strange to me. I'm not sure if I'm seeing the garage door that's asymmetrical or if it's symmetrical. The way the drawing looks, it looks asymmetrical, and then with the door and the small landing,
Right.
it seems like it would maybe be nice to expand and have a porch there in the future.
Across the front?
Mm-hmm. Which I think would.
Above the garage door. So I understand what you're saying. So looking at the front elevation of the garage, where the landing is about 5 feet, you're thinking it would look nicer with the landing going farther across the front of the building.
Yes, but on a different elevation. So these drawings are a little different. These renderings are they look different than what we were submitted. So are the stairs accessed from the alley?
Oh, no. You're seeing the back of the stairs.
Right, and then it jetties out into the front above the garage, the landing.
Okay, I see. Oh, there's no side elevation of that garage on there.
I'm talking about the,
There is one in your packet.
in our packet there is, right.
Yeah.
Can you relocate the front door to the unit? Would that make it, I'm not like totally opposed to it. I think it would just be a nicer appearance from the alley. And then you could, the stairway would be, there's something funny about the landing. When you're looking at the elevation on the packet that we have, all it shows, and unfortunately it's really small, so I can't read your
Okay.
keynotes.
Could I come over just because?
The staff probably has one.
Here. Okay, so,
It looks like a 4x4 post holding up the landing.
oh, that's exactly what it is. There's actually 3 4x4 posts. You have, on the left elevation, you have 2 that you see. And then on the front elevation, you see 2, but you're saying the same post twice. Depending on, this post here, the one that has the O on it, which would be looking at the front elevation on the screen, the left-hand post, and then there's another one going back that you don't see. So there's 3 posts there.
So the landing is cantilevered.
The landing is what?
Cantilevered.
The landing itself is cantilevered, yes.
So is there, if you relocate the door, to a different elevation on the, one of the other three elevations, couldn't you make the landing where it's not cantilevered? You can expand it as a like a porch, or it seems it's asymmetrical, and that's what's bothering me. The entire facade of that front elevation of the garage with the second-story unit is asymmetrical in the rendering, and that's what's bothering me.
Okay, so basically, if you look at your drawings, if you look at the left elevation west,
Yes.
so you're thinking that that's the elevation you think the door should be.
It could be, maybe it could be any of the other ones. I'm just saying not on this particular front elevation, to allow more space for a more proper porch, or balcony, I guess it would be a balcony since it's second story. And then it wouldn't be cantilevered, and you would have less problem with people going in and out of the garage. Because right now, it's being held up, the landing is being held up with a 4x4 post.
So is it a possible, Mark River, corner, I guess, would it, if we made the landing go all the way over, so it was symmetrical with a post on either side of the garage door, just so it was symmetrical, and the landing was wall to wall or whatever size, is that what we're happy to do that?
Is it a 4x4 post holding the landing?
The landing itself is cantilevered. And the post is the string, holding the stringer for the stairs. And so the cantilevered landing from the door, it can cantilever across the whole front of the building. So it could cantilever with no post, or it could still be cantilevered, and we could add a post on the opposite side of the garage door.
Would that impede with cars coming in and out of the garage?
Not at all.
Do you think that would be acceptable at the building department?
So they'd have to look at it as far as building code requirements, but I don't see any reason it can't be designed that way. That's structural stuff, which could probably build that. It's up to building to tell them for sure, but yeah.
I just envisioned someone coming in late at night, kind of turning a little funny and bonking that post.
That post?
Happens. Or you never know, someone
Sure.
is radical in the alley or something.
So, 3 feet out, the landing is 3 feet off of the building setback line, and the building setback line is 5 feet from the alley. And so, if we did put a post on the right-hand side of that garage door, it would be 5 feet off the alley. And the driveway itself, right now we have concrete the whole width of the building, but we could easily move the concrete in 3 or 4 feet so it lines up with the garage door instead of all the way to the building. And then there's no driveway by that post, in other words. So you'd have to go off your driveway onto dirt to hit the post.
Okay. So is the,
I mean, that'd be a way to protect the post.
right, is the garage door, in the rendering, the garage door doesn't look centered? Is that just,
No, it's not centered.
it's not centered? Okay.
No, the garage door is over 5 feet because that leaves a space in the garage for a workbench.
Okay.
And so we're over 5 feet and I think 2.5 feet on the other side.
And so you aren't interested in moving the door to another elevation? Wouldn't work?
So,
Entry.
yeah, just to make sure we really understand, are you talking about the entrance door to the ADU?
Correct.
And you're asking about moving it to the side instead of the alley?
Any of the other elevations, correct.
Um,
For visual aesthetics.
Right, so,
That way, the 2 windows above the garage door could be symmetrical. Is that where you're?
yeah. Right, so, yeah, if that's absolutely necessary for approval, it can. It messes, then the stairs have to get moved back, and it impacts, I don't know how, our long-term goal is having our son, who special needs, live there, and he loves animals, and having him have a little space in the side yard, so having him have a little actual space instead of the stairs dominating the whole thing. But if for aesthetics, it has to be moved to the side, we want to make you happy. We want approval, so we will do what we have to, but our preference would be to leave it where it is. And we could make that rightmost window, now I'm not even checking with my wife, but if the balcony, the porch goes all the way across the building, we could put in a matching door, because that rightmost window is a bedroom, so there could be a door to match the other door, or a taller window to match in style somewhat. But it's also just an alley, and I've spent a lot of time in that alley, and there is nothing in the alley. These are all 150-foot deep lots, and most people's houses are near the front of the lot, and most people have beat-up old trucks and just stuff stored off of the alley. So I don't really think the aesthetics facing the alley matter that much. But we will do what you want.
I would say, Chairman Ray, I would say that we're always concerned about the aesthetics of the alley because we want to lift things up rather than just meeting what's there. But I don't have any heartburn with the way this looks, whether it's symmetrical or not. It's satisfactory to me. What I'm concerned about is the Spanish Revival design. There aren't any other houses of that style. Our guidelines suggest that it should be in the style of the other houses on the block.
So when I was reading it, the understanding I felt, at least what I understood, was to go through the historic, old Escondido historic district, which I did. And when I did that, after I came across 14 different units, there's 3 on Omar Drive, there's 4 on Calamine Street, there's 1 on the end of East 10th, and there's 1 on 9th Street. And so I felt we should be in compliance with the desire of the historic area, rather than just the street.
Well, Chairman Ray, that's an interesting way of interpreting it, but that block, both sides, the houses are mostly 40s, they're mostly ranch style and all that. So I'm a little frustrated that it has that Spanish style that doesn't relate to anything else on the block. And that neighborhood does have mixes of houses. However, that block is pretty consistently, wood-sided bungalows. So I have some frustration with that. I'm also worried about the setback, the drawing that we have in our packets.
Right.
Show that it says something about 15 feet to the front from a line, and I don't know what that line is. Is that the property line?
That's the property line.
It's been the right-of-way line.
Okay. But the houses on either side seem to be much farther back than 15 feet. As I look at the aerial view,
Yeah, the drawing may be confusing, but that 15-foot line actually lines up with the houses on the other side, the 2 adjacent houses on both sides. They're all the same distance from the front property line.
well, so, okay, I'm looking at another aerial view that I printed out, and it appears that the house to the east, the yard is, the setback is wider than 10th Avenue is. So does that mean that 10th Avenue is less than 15 feet wide?
Yeah, there's no sidewalks on that side of 10th Avenue, so they're measuring from the center line of the road.
Chair Ray, if I may, my understanding looking at this aerial here that's up on the screen is that you've got a paved width of the street that's probably only 12 to 15 feet from center line. You've got another 25 feet or so, give or take, I don't know the exact number, that is dirt or landscaped area before you even get to the property line. So what shows on their site plan, part of the area that's shown as 40 feet from center line of street, that's actually not all paved. So I think you've probably got 25 or so feet from the edge of pavement plus the 15-foot setback. And that's where I think you're thinking that the other ones are setback 40, a lot more than the 15 feet. It's based on where the property line is, not where the edge of the pavement is.
Okay, I'm just looking at my, the overhead view that I found online. And the paved part of 10th Avenue is much narrower than the setback of the house to the east, and the house to the west is even farther setback. I just have a real concern. I don't want to, there have been other houses built that violated that average depth of the houses on either side.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just don't want that to happen again.
Right. On that aerial that was just up, basically, if you look at the two houses on either side of 243, the projection, I think, on the one to the right, 245, that projection in the center of the house, and then the projection on the left side of 227, those as shown on the site plan that we've been provided with here, those are, assuming that everything's accurate, those are going to be at the same line as where this house is proposed to go. So that front yard 15-foot setback from the property line is where those structures are and where the proposed home would be.
Okay. All right. Well, and even in that aerial view, you can see the width of asphalt. If you look at 227, from where the asphalt seems, if we can go back to the aerial view. If you look at okay, so are the lines, the lot lines that we're seeing, those are in yellow?
Correct, yeah, those are the approximate lot lines on there.
Okay, so it's 15 feet from that yellow line.
Correct, and I will acknowledge that those lines are not completely 100% spot on, but within a couple feet.
Okay. All right. If it's truly going to be set back, and again, I'm disappointed, that the house that was on the property was board and batten sided, cottage look, and it's just unfortunate that all of a sudden it'll be a little stick out like a sore thumb Spanish revival on this block. Anyone else?
Yeah, we have a Spanish revival in the next block, and it sticks out like a sore thumb, if you want to call it that, because it's the only Spanish revival on the street. It's pure Spanish revival, Mediterranean. They're dotted throughout the historic district, and I think a mix of style is great. Cookie cutter doesn't impress me. I think it's a really nice design. As far as the garage goes, there's going to be less visual effect by putting things on the back, right, and give the people upstairs in the ADU more privacy rather than having it on the front. The only thing I would say, when we built our house, we actually put a 4-foot deck across the front of the house.
Right.
My carpenter was up there cutting off 4 feet of the 2x16s. We could have left that on there and had a bigger deck. I would consider, for the cost of the floor joists, putting the deck all the way across the back there as long as it didn't interfere with the setback. It's an airspace.
Yeah.
It's a small expense that will benefit you in the future as long as they don't turn it into a storage area.
I think that'd be more than acceptable.
The other thing is, as far as the stairs go, if there is any vulnerability, you can put a steel post filled with concrete, that would be protection for it, but, I mean, this is pretty much standard as far as, and I hate to minimalize it, but if somebody did hit that, there's a good chance nobody would be on the stairs when it got hit.
Well, the one thing with the post, if we go across and put a post there, the post will be non-structural, because the deck will still be cantilevered. Right. Because we won't support the deck by the post. Right. So yeah, and then the post will be decorative, and match the other post. And putting the deck across, you're absolutely right. I think it's a really nice look. And I think my owners are happy to do that.
But that's between you and the building department.
Oh, no, I understand that.
Or is-
But we're within the setback line, and so there was room to put that landing, so there's also room to use continual landing.
And I would make it as big as you can.
We're pretty much limited to 3 feet.
3 feet?
Yeah. There's just, we can't really move the garage farther into the lot. And
At 3 feet, or you look at?
At 3 foot, we're right on the setback line.
Because with ADU, it's a 4-foot setback.
There's what?
I think the ADU setback is a little bit less. I don't know if that would pertain to that or not.
That's for side setback.
It actually is side and rear. There's new ADU regulations that the state has enacted that have new state legislation that applies to projects and properties throughout California that allows a 4-foot setback for an accessory dwelling unit. What that is detached. In this instance, since you've got it above a garage, that accessory dwelling unit or the garage itself has to meet that setback to the rear property line. It's 5 feet, I believe, 5 feet or 25 feet from the opposite side of the alley, whichever, basically to ensure that you have room to back out of there. I don't know how wide the alley is in that location.
Yeah, the alley's 20 feet,
Okay.
and the garage itself is set back 8 feet.
Right.
From the property line.
Right. So hypothetically, you could get yourself, either you could move the garage 3 feet closer to the alley, or if you wanted to use the whole, that basically put 4-foot cantilever on the deck, so that gets to 4 feet from the property line as well. That would work.
So you're the planner, so you can answer this for me then. So if I take, right now, the deck is on the property line 5 feet away. I can take that deck and move 1 more foot to a 4 foot.
Correct.
From the property line for the deck part.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Commissioner Cowan commenting. With regard to the style of the home, I like the idea. I find it compatible with the overall neighborhood. And one of the charms of historic neighborhoods is they're not all Levitt towns. Is that mixture of styles that are compatible with the eras are one of the most interesting aspects to this. If we want everything to conform, then we're talking about Levittown.
Commissioner Purvis, I just wanted to, I can't see it because it's very small, but I just wanted to verify, and I believe Paul had already mentioned, or Jasmine, that all the windows, including the windows on the ADU, will be our wood sash.
Yes, what they are, they're Windsor windows are equivalent to a pellet and they're wood windows, and they're aluminum clad on the exterior, because wood does not hold up so well on the outside. And the aluminum cladding, I guess you could look at your building around here where you have a lot of green window metal. It's the same kind of, but it's wood windows with aluminum cladding. The garage has it as well as the house. It's all uniform.
Is it wood on the interior, or is it going to be aluminum clad?
No, it's wood on the interior.
Okay, and then on the exterior, it's the
Only
aluminum?
the exterior is aluminum clad.
And it's powder coated, the
They're
chocolate
powder
brown?
coated. Yeah, they're factory powder coated, so the longevity is long. I mean, that's why you powder coat.
And these are, what style window?
But style windows?
Basement?
They're casements, most of them.
Are there any vinyl windows on the ADU? I know you mentioned that there was vinyl on.
There's 3 vinyl windows, because, and they're in the showers. And you don't want to put a wood window in a shower.
Works. Thank you.
Chairman Ray, thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Purvis. I think it's interesting because we've had people insisting on removing casement windows because of the problems connected with them. But as long as you're familiar with the issues, I would prefer to see wood on the exterior. I know it's a maintenance problem, but the historic homes in the neighborhood tend to have wood windows, and that's the look that's preferred. Do I have any, are there any other comments? Do we have a motion?
One thing before you vote, if that's what you're going to do. I think that you can just count on it, you put it in, specify that we're going to take the landing across the whole building.
Okay, Commissioner Span, I have no problem with the clad aluminum on the outside, and I do see that as being a great maintenance problem. I would move approval with the change that the porch is going to go across the whole width of the garage in the back, and probably come out to the minimum 4-foot setback.
Absolutely. Well, the landing, the porch will go 4 feet to the maximum setback line.
Commissioner Cowan, second.
Okay, all those in favor? Okay. And opposed? So, all but one in favor, Commissioner Ray opposing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Discussion item, H2 is accessory dwelling unit legislation.
Good evening, Commissioners. So I put this item on the agenda so we can just talk briefly about some recent state legislation with regard to accessory dwelling units. I made a presentation to the Old Escondido neighborhood group on, I think it was last Thursday, on the same topic. So some of you have heard this before. I'm not going to get into a lot of those details, but basically what the recent state legislation is allows more flexibility for homeowners who are trying to build accessory dwelling units on their property. It precludes or limits certain things and certain stipulations that the city had previously, one of those being requirements or allowances for owner occupancy. We used to our code as it currently reads prohibits us from, or prohibits the owner from renting out both units, so they have to live on the site somewhere. Recent state legislation said that that's no longer a possibility. We have to allow both units to be rental units. Any deed restrictions on existing accessory dwelling units that might be there are considered null and void. This is for a period of 5 years. After that, the state is going to consider it again, and potentially, my guess would be at this point, they'll probably extend that and maybe just make it permanent. It would become a very large challenge if they rescinded that, and then we had deed restrictions that said, oh wait, now you got to go move back into the house you've been renting out for 5 years. I think that would be a little bit difficult to achieve. So, the real thing I wanted to kind of get here from the commission is some input on ideas that might be available or things we should consider when looking at some modifications to our ordinance that would address historic homes. If there's or historic properties, if there's an accessory dwelling unit proposed on a property that's existing with an existing home, it does not have to come to Historic Preservation Commission, regardless of the fact that the home might be on the local register, Mills Act. We're still looking at a couple of items on that, or issues on that side of it, with regard to the contract itself. But the new state legislation precludes any type of design review from whether it be staff or any type of decision-making body. What we've got currently in our ordinance is a requirement that the colors and materials for an accessory dwelling unit match those for the primary structure. At this point, our goal is to definitely keep that there, and we're kind of looking for any input that the commission might have here that would help us strengthen that with regard to historic properties. So whether it be same roof style or same landscape, whatever else, some other ideas that we can actually codify so it is objective standards that would help keep some continuity and some appearance that's appropriate for an historic property there. So I wanted to just put that out there and see what you folks had any suggestions on that might be helpful to us.
Commissioner Purvis, do you have a deadline that you would like this information?
We are currently working on an update to the zoning ordinance. I believe that it is going to be going to Planning Commission in not too long. I think it's on February 11th. The actual information and the proposed code language has to be to us. We probably have to have that ready to go a week prior. So if you could get me any information, any ideas that you have of language that we might want to be, or we might be able to incorporate, if you can get that to me maybe by the first Tuesday in February. So I guess, I don't know what day of the week, what date that would be, but a week prior to the meeting. I think the 11th is the second Tuesday, so it'd be the 4th, I guess. You can get me any info by the 4th, and I can get it to our assistant director, who can take a look and see what changes and other information he can incorporate into our ordinance.
Okay. The first thing that comes to my mind is Escondido actually designates garages, and I think that some people will probably want to do garage conversions. And since the garage itself is designated, it is its own little resource, not necessarily tied to the house. How would that be reviewed by staff? Would it still remain as ministerial, or?
Correct.
And then, so when it's going through ministerial review, is there a particular staff member that has knowledge with the design guidelines and the standards that would be doing the review, or would it just be anybody in any staff member?
So it would have to be objective standards. It's not guidelines. Those don't cut it, unfortunately. It has to be codified language. So where in our code it says matching colors and materials, that's what it would have to be, something to that, all the way to that specificity. Saying that it's got to have, I guess you could say if it's got siding, it's got to have the same width of each band or whatever, something of that sort. But as long as it is very specific, and we can point to a code and say this is what needs to happen, because we can't say, no, go change that if it's not codified.
So the design guidelines, are they not codified?
Design guidelines are adopted as guidelines, but not formal zoning code, or not formal legislation.
Chair Ray, I'm curious, we have several black granite houses in Old Escondido. Does that mean that you'd be requiring black granite ADU?
That's what the code currently reads, yeah. And I don't know that we were looking at changing that to change it for, to say something to the effect of, you got to match what's there, except if you've got, this kind of thing. That's a little bit too specific for for a citywide ordinance.
Okay, because, in this situation, I actually have two houses that were built on my lot on 1927 and 1931, and they're different. And now we're going back to the charm of having a variety of styles. And I wouldn't object to some differences. My 1927 house has the original colors, and they're different from the front house, as approved by the city. But, so I'm not so tied to that. But if the city already is, I guess people have to match.
Commissioner Span, the fact that yours don't match is great, but I think the intent of this is to protect the neighborhood in the future with a rash of poor quality ADUs, and I think the only way we can do that is in codification. And I think it ought to read the same architectural style as the existing historic structure. Now that is specific, but not specific enough. I think it would have to go on and say the finishes, texture has to match. Not to say that all of this won't get struck down because of a future Sacramento ruling, but for the time being, I think we need to protect the integrity of the ADUs. I've never been against ADUs, but I am against people throwing them up just for the sake of income. And this doesn't even get into the full impact of this law, because along with the initial ADU, you can put up a smaller ADU, so potential properties can put up 2 accessory dwelling units on property. If you look through the historic district and consider every piece of property with 2 more dwelling units on it, it's not going to be a desirable place to live, no matter what kind of historic value you have in the home. So we need to protect the neighborhood as much as possible, and I think the only way we can do that right now is to protect the integrity of the ADUs. I would say, whatever we can be specific about has to match the existing dwelling on the property, the roof line, roof materials. To me, I think, and I've always said that, if the person that originally built that house was to stand there today, even though he's long dead, and look at it, he would not know what he built and what he didn't, because it would all have his signature to it.
Yeah, so again, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it's got to be more specific than same architectural style. If you all have any ideas on that, if you want to shoot me an email and let me know kind of some specifics as far as that type of language, and I can get that to our assistant director and see what we can do to incorporate something that might provide a little more protection. So we are also looking at what effects and impacts an accessory dwelling unit would have on a property that's got a Mills Act contract, especially if it's a conversion of a portion of a structure. I don't know how that's all going to play out. We're still trying to figure it out. But whatever else you can come up with for the design, and if you've got any other questions regarding the ADU legislation, I can do my best to answer them here, but it's all new and we're still figuring it out ourselves, so let me know.
Commissioner Purvis, is it basically safe to say that the single-family residence, the zoning for single-family residence is out, and now it's basically 2 units or 3 apparently?
So basically I'll say this, every single family home, regardless of lot size, is permitted to have at least an 800 square foot accessory dwelling unit. They're also potentially permitted to have what's called a junior accessory dwelling unit. I think the junior ADU is something that has to be within the footprint and the confines of the existing home. So you couldn't build 2 detached structures, or you couldn't add on in order to put a second or a junior ADU. The junior ADU can also share kitchen facilities and sanitation facilities, restroom with the primary home, if that's the desire. It doesn't have to, though. So yeah, really, you get probably at least 2, maybe even 3 units on any residential lot. A couple of the big issues and concerns we have are really with regard to garage conversions and the loss of parking and the amount of cars that would then be forced onto the street, especially in neighborhoods where there's not a lot of parking to start with. I know there's street parking in alleys, at least in the OEN, but not necessarily enough for everyone and for everywhere. And if you got what, let's say 3 houses, let's say 3 units, maybe 5 cars per lot, there's not going to be room. And we're concerned about that, but our hands are a little tied by state legislation.
Especially since now it says they don't have to require parking.
Correct. Yeah. If you convert a garage, there's no requirement to replace that parking elsewhere on the site.
So is the city working with, I guess, the State Office of Historic Preservation regarding like if a carriage house is modified and it becomes a dwelling unit, design standards, I mean, we can't annihilate the historic resource to accommodate. I mean, maybe the visual, maybe it's going to, I guess what it would end up happening is when an addition is attached to a historic building, it would be kind of similar where the visual part of the public right-of-way, the public view of that historic resource really needs to be maintained.
And that could be one of those kind of specific ordinance language changes. Is any changes to the exterior appearance of the structure have to be or cannot be on the street-facing facade or something of that sort. So that's one avenue or one idea, and I've got notes on that already. So that might be something else that if that sparks other ideas for everyone, that's the kind of thing to keep considering as far as other modifications to ordinance.
So I'm sorry to trying to hog everything. How does the certificate of appropriateness work with this change? With the ministerial aspect of it.
So it's still going to have to be issued, but it's going to say it's appropriate based on state housing legislation, not necessarily, state housing legislation is going to trump, at this point, is trumping a lot of local legislation. And I think there's still that kind of friction and not battle, but the conflicts between historic preservation and housing issues. And I know that's still being, even at the state level, that's being debated too.
Yeah, because we are the certified local government, so we have that partnership with, obviously, the state and the federal government. And so there's, according to planning theory, you're not supposed to have internal conflicts within the policies themselves, right? But, so the certificate of appropriateness would still be issued by the city. So is it going to be like a walk-up type of staff review? Whoever's working the counter? I'm just trying to understand like what type of, I do plan on providing like maybe
Sure.
brainstorming and sending you something. I just want
Sure. So right now, an accessory dwelling unit comes in as a ministerial planning application. So it's not just a building permit, you're good to go. We do route them to a couple other departments for their input, feedback. Most of the time, if they meet the zoning ordinance requirements, then they get approved. If there's issues that are major concerns that another department has, the one I can think of that I dealt with was with regard to a property that was illegally connected to sewer and never paid for sewer connect. So that was something we did have to resolve before we approved that ADU. In most cases, though, if you're meeting the ordinance, Article 70 of our zoning code, if you meet all those requirements, everything else is just a standard issue thing that goes on building plans and grading plans if necessary. There's no formal conditions of approval on the ADU. Yeah, so we check it against Article 70 and any other appropriate or applicable zoning code sections, and if it meets that, then we approve.
Okay, one more question, I'm sorry. So tonight, this afternoon, we had a ADU come before us, and the reason we were able to make comments about it was because it was actually a discretionary project associated with a larger primary development.
Right. It's the primary residence is a new structure on the property. If this were just going to be an ADU on a property, that wouldn't have been here.
Thank you.
Chairman Ray, I fully support an idea that anything that could be seen from the public right-of-way would not it needs to be considered design review or whatever, not automatically going through, so.
So I don't think we could require design review, but maybe what we could do is require that it not be visible from the
Okay.
street or be behind a certain spot or something like that.
Good, that's what I really meant, I guess, but, and also, as far as the Mills Act goes, as long as owners are, realize that with a junior ADU and a full ADU that could be considerably larger than the original house on the property, that the Mills Act, that their property taxes will go up considerably because the Mills Act only covers the house that is on the local register. So who knows, maybe the income would be greater than that loss, but I just hope homeowners would be aware of that.
I'm going to comment on that because my house, the two-story part is the historical part. So I received that benefit on that. The kitchen and the mudroom and the bathroom are all new construction, even though they're made to look like they're original. And so I paid almost taxes on that. I knew that's what would happen, is that the house would be, taxes would be adjusted based on the new construction part. Like this, my garage is newer and that one is new story. But the original house is still there, and that part receives the benefit. And it's still substantial.
Commissioner Span, I had one other question. It's not really related as well. I actually have two. First of all, if you have a garage that's on the Mills Act and you convert the inside of it to an ADU, they will still have to go through the permitting process, which will go to the county assessor, so that even though the outside of the structures on the Mills Act, the living space inside will be taxed at current rate. It would be my hope. The other thing is, my understanding of the junior ADU was not correct. And basically all that is a rental room. They're calling it junior because it has to be inside the structure. So what you're going to do is you're going to take one of your bedrooms and call it, and now were you in a neighborhood that would preclude renting out rooms, you can rent out a room. Because it's a shared bathroom, shared kitchen.
Yes and no. It doesn't have to be a shared bathroom and a shared kitchen. That is an option for a property owner. But someone could come in and convert their garage, call that a junior ADU, have a kitchen facility, have a bathroom, and it's not part of the main home. It doesn't have any connection interior to the main home, and it would just be basically that
But I think
junior
on
ADU.
here, unless I read it wrong, it said it had to have an interior. Did I read that wrong?
You may not have. I'm still familiarizing myself with everything. Let's see. Separate entrance.
I think it said.
Yeah, separate entrance.
Exterior entrance as well as interior access to the main residence required.
Correct. You're right. You are right.
The other thing is, if everybody gets on the bandwagon and constructs an ADU, where does that leave us with the treatment plant? Are we going to be expanding our treatment plant to accommodate all these things? I know this is not it.
That's a good question.
And is the state then going to?
Are they gonna kick in for that one? I don't know. And on top of that, the other issue that brings up is not just what the impact is going to be on the plant, but the fact that we cannot, and we actually haven't been, but we cannot charge development impact fees for accessory dwelling units. So they don't pay sewer capacity fees. They don't pay sewer and water connection. They don't pay park fees. They don't pay traffic fees, all that kind of stuff. So basically, it's a duplex zoning for single-family homes.
Is that something we could change, that they would have to? Or is
No,
that
that's
included by the state?
We currently do not charge it. Now, if we wanted to, we can't.
Commissioner Purvis, how could we, actually I can kind of see some issues evolving if there's some heritage trees, and if someone wants to lop that tree down. I mean, it'd be horrible, but you never know. want to lop that tree off to build their junior and their primary ADU, so that, I mean, and they're a heritage tree.
So here's, I guess, a couple of things we can, push comes to shove, if someone is allowed to build an 800 square foot ADU on their lot, regardless of lot size, and we have to accommodate that, as long as it meets a 4-foot side yard, rear yard setback, and is no more than 16 feet tall. In the, let's see, if there's a heritage tree on the site, we can, or some other feature that is appropriate to protect if possible, we can do what is possible to make the ADU, to put that in a location that's not going to impact it. But if they are requesting a detached ADU and 800 square feet means that they have to wipe out a heritage tree or whatever else, I don't think we can do anything about that.
Well, they would already be protected because it would be, cultural landscapes are also historic resources, and so it's supposed to be protected by local or state or national policies and regulations. So if there's, we'd have to somehow find language, because that would actually be, when someone's reviewing it in a ministerial aspect, they'd be looking to see, does this property, because Escondido designates garages, plus the primary residence, plus heritage trees and other cultural elements that aren't necessarily structures or buildings. And they are protected. And so even though they're allowed to build an ADU, have you found anything like that on maybe that listserv or any chatter?
Yeah, I haven't actually seen anything on that aspect. But I will say that we can't say no to someone who wants to build a 800 square foot single-story ADU. And if that means, this is again one of those dilemmas and one of those conflicts potentially between codes. States mandating one thing and another thing both. So at this point, I know that the housing legislation and the ADU legislation is kind of where a lot of the, I'm sure you've all heard, where a lot of the hot topic info and issues are arising over the last several years, but particularly the Housing Crisis Act of 2019. So that had a lot of these provisions. The ADU provisions and ADU legislation were part of that. That seems like it's trumping a lot of the other state legislation that may dictate what local jurisdictions can or can't require. We haven't come across this kind of situation yet, and like I said, we're still trying to figure a lot of this stuff out ourselves. So the Mills Act issue and how that affects it, I'm hoping that the county assessor's office knows what to do with that, because we're still figuring out heritage trees, anything else like that. It's going to be a challenge to work through it all, and then once we figure it all out, it'll change everything again. So,
Commissioner Cowan here. I've spoken to the county assessor in charge of this, and he already has his ideas about how to look at ADUs for historic properties and Mills Act properties. And in a way, he's leaning towards leniency on the valuation. I could tell you some technical parts of that, but that's the sum total of it.
Anyone else? Okay, then we will move on to item 3, discussion item, Downtown Specific Plan Ad Hoc Committee.
one moment. Okay, so at the last Historic Preservation Commission meeting, we discussed what the process procedures would be to get some suggestions and some recommendations, formal recommendations from the commission here with regard to changes that you would like to see or that you believe are appropriate for the downtown specific plan, particularly with regard to design review process. And what we can do, we'll be setting up, and what we'll probably do in a few minutes here is basically create a subcommittee or an ad hoc subcommittee that would be given 6 months to come up with some suggestions, provide those and present those in writing to the commission here as a whole. And then those would be forwarded through planning staff to the council as a recommendation from the commission. The subcommittee can have no more than 3 members, based on it being less than half of the quorum of the HPC. And we would be willing to, or we'd be interested in getting reports every meeting for the next several months until I think by our July meeting would be when we would need to have something written and provided to the commission as a whole and to staff, so we could go forward with something on that. But yeah, every 2 months when we have our meetings, if the subcommittee would want to provide and make a presentation or share some information on where they're going with it and potentially get some input from the commission as a whole, that could be done in this type of a public setting. So if there's some discussion that you want to have first, please, and then otherwise we'll look at potentially who would want to be involved on that. We need at least 2, no more than 3.
Chairman Ray, I'm pleased to see that this is a possibility, and because I brought this up at the last meeting, I would like to be part of that ad hoc subcommittee. And if there's any other discussion about this idea, please speak up.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Purvis, this particular subcommittee would be to address some of the, well, I guess what we talked about in November with design review and modifying, or I guess the goal would be to amend the downtown specific plan.
Right, so the city council has to authorize staff to work on an amendment to the downtown specific plan, so there has to be a request to do that. What we're looking to the body here for is to put together information towards that request so that can be made to council. Then at that point, staff will go ahead and work internally and then work with the commission when we're ready to bring forth those changes and have a recommendation from the HPC on specifically what those are. But we want to be able to present something to council as far as that request and have something formally in hand, that we're not just going and saying, yeah, the commission wants to look at changes here. We want to see at least a first stab at these are the kinds of changes, or this is what we would like to see in the ordinance or in the downtown specific plan. That'll be presented, and then staff will take that as part of a review and part of consideration for the overall specific plan amendment.
And I know in November you had mentioned that you would want to lump it together with some of the other overall specific plan updates.
I'm not sure if that's going to be something we will or won't do. I think whether I said I want to or that it's possible. I know we're considering a couple other specific plan-wide modifications. So that's an option potentially, and depending on timeline and all that stuff. So.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Ray, based on level of knowledge, I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but I would like to invite Commissioners Purvis and Cowan to be involved in this. But it's only dependent on your availability.
Commissioner Cowan, I agree. I'll join it.
Commissioner Purvis, I don't mind joining the subcommittee as long as I'm not taking the spot of someone else who's interested in doing so.
Commissioner Hanlon, I think those are excellent choices.
Okay, then we have our 3, and I look forward to moving right along with this.
Likewise.
Great. So at the next meeting, what I'll do is I'll continue to put this on the agenda for the next 3 meetings, and whether it's to provide a formal recommendation or just to provide an update and input to the rest of the commission and to staff, that'd be fine, and we'll just keep it there until July or until we've got a formal recommendation from the group. And I would recommend, if you don't already have, to exchange contact information, emails, phone numbers with the with the three of you, staff is not going to get involved. We'll let you guys do what you can and then bring it back to us.
Great, thank you. Okay, discussion item number 4, 2020 Historic Preservation Awards.
Yes, Commissioners, Paul Bingham, Assistant Planner, we have every year the opportunity to nominate people and places for awards that deal with historic preservation. In the past, we've often had a theme. We've done adobes, we've done agricultural historic sites and people, families. We've done historic businesses downtown. We've awarded people who have done their best to do a historic assessment of their house or to keep their property preserved, and we've noticed what a great job they've done, and we've awarded them. So we're going to be doing that again this May for Historic Preservation Month. We will meet again as an HPC in March, but instead of waiting until March to get everyone's idea, we decided we're going to bring it up first part of this year. So hopefully you all saw this in the agenda and it started some mental exercises and maybe you have some thoughts. And that's what I'm here to do, is just to kind of take notes and let the HPC run with this. So themes, people, places, whatever you want to do, I'm going to write notes.
Commissioner Purvis, I remember from last year, I think it's the feed and supply place over near Quince. Was it Quince? Hawthorne? Yeah. I remember something that coming up, but it was after we made our decision. And then, so I don't know, honestly, I'll be honest, I don't know the history of it. So I know Carol probably does. Breitenfeld.
Apparently Hawthorne is unusual in that it has always been a feed store. Not owned by the same family, but it has always been in that spot and doing the same business. So it's unique in that it's a business that stayed in place in Escondido. So I don't know that the Hawthorne family has received any recognition in the past.
And then I remember I had suggested the, oh gosh, my brain here, the lumber yard. Oh,
Escondido Lumber or the,
is it J&J?
yeah,
J&J, and that used to be part of the old airport.
yeah.
I think we gave them an award a couple years ago.
Okay.
It's been longer than a couple of years ago, but yeah, it seems to me a while back we did.
Because I recommended them, and that's while I've been here, so it's probably, could be a while.
And then the other, I think it was the only one that maybe came forward this, I don't think we did any designations last year in 2019, but I do recall an applicant for the Mills Act. She did a really nice job with her application packet, and then she updated all the forms. And it was, I don't think it was November, maybe the September meeting. I can't remember her name. I'll look it up. I thought she did a nice job if we were going to look at people and maybe some of the things that they did. But it would be for an application. She did a good job with the nomination or Mills Act request, or may not be applicable. That's all I got.
I'm Chairman Ray, I'm thinking about the Turrentine House. Was the Hawthorne being in the same family or whatever, same business all these years, it reminded me Turrentine is no longer in the same original family. However, the current owners have done a nice job sprucing it up and bringing it back. So that might be something. And it also occurs to me that maybe a nod to Swami's for retaining the ghost sign on the side of the wall, or on the side wall. Just acknowledging that. They could have just painted it over. Oh, and that occurs to me, the Jor Muffler Man had a new Santa suit this year, and I think he's become a part of our community and a part of our history, and I think that was a nice community effort that the Sickles upholstery people helped make that happen.
That's fun. I like that. It's different.
You know, every time I go past the Methodist church there on South Calmia, that's probably old enough to be considered certainly significant, even if it's not historic. And the Christian Science Church, I think, are both outstanding examples of well-maintained property in the historic district that add to the district quality of life.
That's a good point. We have quite a few churches that are quite significant. I'm sure we've never done that as a theme.
It would encourage them to maintain their property.
Yeah.
That's actually a really good idea for a theme. I do need to run it through our attorney's office with regard to the ability to specifically look at religious institutions. I don't know if that's, I don't have any idea on it, but I just wanted to make sure that I can do that if this is a direction we want to go.
And there is no cash award or anything like that. Plus, we're awarding instruction, not the group of people.
Sure.
Yeah, it would be for architecture.
Mm-hmm. And it's not looking at any one denomination.
Right.
Well, would it be for architecture, or would it be just for maintaining the structure? And it's
The architecture, those two in particular.
okay.
And then there's, it was included in the slideshow for the mid-centuries, but the one that was, the church that's being rebuilt on Grand, new vintage, whatever. Yeah, wherever that is on Juniper and 13th or something?
The old one.
The old one. Oh, okay, yeah. Because that has a unique style to it. And then we could go all the way back to the one, or I guess we only have one more brick church left that was built way back in the day. Yeah, Orange and Fifth, okay.
There's also, I'm sorry, Commissioner Purvis, there's also the idea of bringing in some of the cemeteries for cultural landscape. And they have the cemetery preservation. That's a pretty big movement on the East Coast. We don't really see it too much here, but I know it does have a little bit of momentum.
Ooh,
Maybe the old part.
another church is the one at Juniper and 2nd or 3rd. It was the Episcopal Church, and it's sad. It's not occupied, but they are protecting those unique stained glass windows.
Is that the one with the bookstore now?
Yeah. Well, it was a bookstore. Now it's nothing. Okay, any other?
So kind of the thing, maybe we all just go out and see what else is out there and bring it back to the next meeting as far as ideas, and you're gonna let us know.
Yeah, I'll discuss that real briefly. It should probably be a 2-minute email back and forth with the city attorney's office just to verify there's no issues with doing this. And if there isn't, I think we've easily come up with a theme this year, which is nice without having to search. And I think there's a lot of, it sounds like that there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of different potential recipients. I think, again, like we've done in years past, probably a good idea to limit it to maybe 3. And choose the 3 that we think are the most architecturally significant or believe that have the most architectural historical value.
In your pitch to the city attorney, you might want to remind them that all all faiths and denominations
Of course.
are
Of course.
considered. However, the historic value is only in these. in
Correct,
particular.
of course.
And also, we can couple it with some kind of a, we developed quite a few new worship centers, from Resurrection to Emmanuel Faith put a new building up, Christian Reformed Church. This town has seen some big construction monetarily and through faith. So I think it's nice that we can put that all together without recognizing any particular one, which is the fact that we call it the year of faith and something.
Okay. Can you let us know if we get the thumbs down on this, so we can start thinking
Yep.
again? Okay,
Okay. I'll see what I can get as far as an answer in the next week or so,
great,
and then just shoot an email to the group.
thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on to oral communication. We don't have anything there. Commissioner comments? Pardon?
Actually, I do.
Oh.
We just wanted to let the commission know that, let's see, I had my note, and you moved on so quick, and I'm still trying to take notes.
Oh,
Laura Gonzalez was an intern that we've had, and one of the things that we gave her as a task to do, and she completed it, was to scan all of the pages in both our 2001 and our old 1990 historic survey. So all of those thousands of pages, including the old photos that were taken in 1989 or whatever, and 2000, are now digital images. And so we're going to be working with IT upstairs to get those on our city's website, so that you can look up an address and you can see that document that was created by the historians. So right now, if you come into the counter and want to know something about your house that's in one of those tomes, we have to go get it off the shelf for you, put you in a little room, and if you want Xerox copies of it, we'll do that. But we're very happy that Lauren came and was willing to do. She literally spent days in front of the scanning machine, and we're very happy that she did that, and very happy for the results.
and we're happy too. Thank you.
I think we ought to give her some kind of a recognition
Yeah.
frame that she can hang on her wall. That is a lot of work.
We can nominate her for a historic preservation award.
Good.
Thank you. I think this is really great news and a really great way to start the new year. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Hanlon, is there some way that we can recognize her?
I don't see why not.
The mayor is also looking for awards nominations for February.
Not
for volunteers.
I'm not sure that an internship is eligible for that. We can look at it, but if it is, then yeah, I think that it's appropriate for someone to do that type of a nomination.
But is it the commission's thought then to either with the mayor in February or in May when we do these to include her name?
I think it'd be more appropriate when we do the awards.
Yeah.
I concur. I think that it would be nice to recognize her for the preservation award.
Okay. Well, she's not a historic church, so
Yeah.
you know, we'd have to.
I mean, it's a huge. I mean, as you guys know, the survey's been around for what, 20 years. The most recent one.
Oh, we've been talking about this. Like, staff never has days to just spend in front of a scanner. So.
Yeah, I think maybe a certificate of appreciation during the historic preservation awards would be probably something that'd be really good, and I'm sure that she would be really, really appreciative of that. So.
I have a question real quick, actually, a comment. I was wondering if the staff would consider going for a CLG grant this year for something.
Ooh, I think the deadline for grant submittal is what, April?
I believe it is April, maybe March. I know it's right around, I know the deadline is like May 1st usually.
Yeah.
It's a matter of staff time and availability to actually submit that at this point, and
Is Lauren still around?
no.
We burnt her out, I think.
You know, if we can do it, I know that we've wanted to, we've had on our to-do list to get another survey done. It's just a matter of priority.
Well, we had Commissioner Hanwett for a while, who was a professional grant writer, and we never used her expertise, so.
It's on our radar. I mean, potentially we can do something, we'll see.
I know OHP, when I talked to them last year, they were very encouraging to have the city of Escondido submit something. Doesn't mean anything, they're just very encouraging. We are CLG, they've probably been waiting for us for a while. It would be nice, we have a lot, I'm sure there's a lot we don't know about the city that's up and coming still, since the age threshold is only 50 or 45, depending on which register you're looking at. It would be nice, just asking. I know you guys are busy, so appreciate everything you've already done.
Okay, any other comments, commissioner comments? Okay, then we're adjourned.